Is learning a second language as life-changing as you imagine it'll be? When I was learning Italian, everyone was talking about the journey, the methods, the struggles, the milestones, but I couldn't find anyone talking about the aftermath. So that's what this video is. For as long as I could remember, I wanted to speak Italian. It wasn't just about the language. My mom's family is from Italy, so for me it was personal. It was about connection, identity, and the culture I grew up around. And like a lot of people with a similar background, it kind of lived in the back of my mind for years as this thing that would be really cool to do someday. And then I actually did it. So today I want to talk about what that's actually like, because after years of building it up in my head, the reality was far from what I pictured. Let's start with the stuff I was sure would happen. Growing up, my cousin and I had this plan. We were both going to learn Italian so that we could communicate on the basketball court without anyone understanding us, like Kobe Bryant used to do with some of his teammates. Full tactical advantage, nobody knows what's coming. We never did it, still haven't. And honestly, even now that I speak Italian, basically nobody in my immediate circle does, so the language switching in front of strangers never really came together. Turns out fluency only goes so far when there's nobody to be fluent with. I also always assumed that once I learned Italian, I'd be speaking it with my grandparents who are from Italy. I pictured these long, detailed conversations, things that would have been too difficult to fully explain to them in English, being communicated effortlessly in Italian. That hasn't really happened either. And the reasons are actually kind of interesting. So, the first is that my entire relationship with my grandparents, the first 29 years of it, has been built in English. Switching languages now out of nowhere honestly feels a little awkward. The dynamic is already set. The second reason is something I didn't fully appreciate until I started learning. My grandparents' generation of Italian immigrants largely spoke their local dialect, in their case Neapolitan, not standard Italian. So if we did have a conversation in Italian, it'd almost be like both of us working in a second language, which kind of defeats the purpose. But here's what did happen. The first time I had even a small exchange with my grandpa in Italian, and we probably only said two or three sentences to each other, nothing significant, he was definitely just testing me. I got goosebumps. Genuinely, it was one of the simplest interactions imaginable, but one I'll remember forever. After all those years of it feeling out of reach, something about it was just special. And then there's family in Italy. There's one blood relative, my grandpa's cousin, that I've met in person, and I can tell you that visiting him was one of the coolest experiences of my life. Spending days at a time in a completely non-English speaking environment, fully immersed amongst the locals. Now we check in on holidays, catch up on WhatsApp. He gives me the inside perspective on what's going on over there and asks about life in the US. Being able to have relationships with family abroad is every bit as cool as you'd think it'd be. I'm actually hoping to meet some members from my grandma's side this fall. And none of that happens without the language. That's not a surface level benefit, that's a relationship. Now, here's where it gets interesting because the things that I didn't expect are the ones that have actually changed my life. I mentioned my grandparents earlier, and I want to come back to my grandma specifically because this one surprised me. I've always known my grandma, obviously. I know her sweet personality, I know how she carries herself, and I know her difficulties with the English language. And so many of her little comments, her sarcasm, her jokes, the way she tells a story, those all happen in Italian. And I genuinely never registered them as a kid. They just went over my head. Learning Italian meant I started catching them, even if they were in her dialect. And what I realized was my grandma is so funny. Like, this whole layer of her personality that I had been completely missing for most of my life. I had only found it because I learned the language. That one hit me harder than I expected. And to be clear, I don't feel like I know her better as a result of learning Italian because obviously we know our loved ones even with the language barrier. But I do feel like I have a better understanding of her. The other thing I didn't see coming was the culture. I went into this thinking I was learning a language. What I didn't realize was I was opening a door to an entire world. Over the years, I've built a huge library of Italian music I listen to almost every day. I have favorite Italian books, podcasts, TV shows, movies, things I never would have found or appreciated without the language. And kind of a fun random one, I've become a genuine soccer fan. A sport I basically never cared about before outside of the World Cup has become something I actually follow, largely because of Italian culture pulling me in through the language. I didn't expect any of that, and honestly, it's been as big of a part of the experience as the language itself. I felt this very clearly in my trips to Italy. I've been twice, once at 21 before I spoke Italian and once at 26 after. And the difference was stark enough that it's worth talking about directly. The first trip was great, but I was an American tourist. Most Italians, whatever your heritage, if you're speaking English, they treat you like an American, which isn't a bad thing, but the interaction stayed pretty surface level. There's a barrier, language and culture, not an unfriendly one, just a real one. The second trip was different. The moment Italians heard me speak the language, the whole dynamic shifted. They wanted to know the story. What part of Italy is your family from? Where did you learn to speak Italian? And there was this warmth that I hadn't felt the first time. Like they were letting me in, not as a tourist, but as something closer to one of them. That's hard to put a price on. So, was it exactly what I hoped for? Honestly, no. The secret language on the basketball court never happened. The long conversations with my grandparents in Italian haven't materialized the way that I pictured. But what did happen was better than what I expected. A relationship with my grandpa's cousin I never would have had, a side of my nonna that I didn't know existed, a whole culture, music, stories, soccer, books that became part of my daily life, and two trips to the same country that felt like entirely different experiences. You spend years chasing a language, and then you get there and you realize that the language was just the door. What's on the other side of it, that's the part that nobody tells you about. That's what the acquisition method is built to get you to. So, if this resonated with you, subscribe and stick around, step by step at your own pace. No textbooks, no stress.